The Civil War had begun just a few months earlier. He was 49 years old when he and his three sons, the youngest being only 15, rode into town and enlisted in the Union Army. They all ended up in one of the biggest battles of the Civil War. Shortly after that battle, the father became injured and all four of them deserted to carry their father back home. The rest of the story is filled with imprisonment, court-martials, forfeitures, promotions, bloody battles, a dishonorable discharge, and redemption. In this video, I'll tell you the story. Hey everybody, this is Colonel Carson with Family Tree Nuts, and while building a family tree for a client, I found this wild story about her second and third great grandfathers. The more that I discovered about them, the more that I knew that I wanted to share their story with all of you. At Family Tree Nuts, we build family trees for clients that either don't know how, don't have the time, or don't want to pay for those expensive membership fees. We also make history videos all over the United States and a few countries. So if you like videos like these, be sure to subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up if you like this video. The Matlock family was just like a large majority of our ancestors. Simple farmers with family all around them. They lived in rural Knox County in southeastern Kentucky, and in many ways were somewhat sheltered from a lot of the politics that were tearing the country apart. One has to wonder, what was the motivation for a man that was almost 50 to grab up his three sons and head off to war? It is possible that they were just staunch patriots and couldn't handle the thought of the nation being ripped apart. Perhaps they had fallen on hard times and joined for economic reasons. Perhaps they had heard the stories about their grandfathers getting land grants for their service during the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812, and they didn't want to miss that opportunity. Perhaps they had gotten swept up in the excitement and the buzz that was sweeping the country. Most thought that the war would be over in a matter of months, and they probably didn't want to be one of the few in the community that sat on the sidelines. You will soon see that they ended up getting much more than they could have possibly expected. Charles Matlock and his three sons, James, age 24, Nelson Preston, age 17, and William, age 15, rode into Barbourville, Knox County, Kentucky, and enlisted for 3 years as privates in Company A, the 8th Kentucky Infantry of the Union Army, on 2 September 1861. A month later, they mustered in for training at Camp Dick Robinson in Garrard County, Kentucky. The four men were present with their unit for over a year, and they served duty in Estill Springs and Lebanon, Kentucky. Then they were sent to Nashville, then Murfreesboro, Wartrace, and Tullahoma, Tennessee. By the summer of 1862, they fell under General William Bull Nelson, and they marched to Louisville, Kentucky, in pursuit of General Braxton Bragg. At some point, Charles was sick and spent a short time in the hospital in Murfreesboro. Then they were sent to Russellville and Glasgow. The four men fought together at the epic Battle of Perryville on 8 October 1862. Over the next few weeks, they fought in a few more skirmishes, but at some point in the middle of October, Charles, the father, jumped out of a moving wagon. When he landed, he busted both of his ankles and he slammed his head on the ground. He was examined by the Army surgeon, who instructed him to do what he could and gave him permission to ride in wagons. We know what happened next, but we don't know why. Charles obviously couldn't continue to fight with the unit. They were getting sent to Nashville, which had a large Army hospital, and I'm sure that that's where Charles was going to be heading. Perhaps the family had made a pact to always stick together. At any rate, on 5 November 1862, all four men deserted the Army from Glasgow, Kentucky, and they carried their injured father approximately 150 miles to their home. Now let that scene sink in a minute. It is unknown how long it took them to get home, and I'm sure that their journey was full of adventure and stories that they would long talk about. Once the sons returned their father home safely, they returned to their unit on 26 December 1862, which at the time was stationed in Nashville. They had been gone for 50 days. From here, each of the three brothers' stories vary a bit. We know a bit more of the story of the youngest brother, William, who was only 15 at the time that he enlisted, and he was also the second great-grandfather of our client. Upon returning to their unit, it is said that the brothers were fined their pay while they were gone, and an additional 2 weeks' pay, and 1 month's tobacco ration. James, who was the oldest, was clearly the leader and was promoted to corporal just a few weeks after the brothers returned. He was present with his unit except for a 5-month stint where he was sick in the hospital in McMinnville, Tennessee. Nelson Preston, the middle brother, along with William, was present with his unit until the end of their service. All three brothers, upon returning from taking their father home, were assigned to Company E, still in the 8th Kentucky Infantry. All three of them took part in the Battle of Stones River and the Tullahoma campaign. James ended up in the hospital and missed the remainder of the battles that his brothers fought in. William and Nelson Preston went on to fight at the Battle of Chickamauga, where 79 men in their unit were killed. Next, they fought in the Chattanooga campaign, and then the Battle of Lookout Mountain, where their unit was the first to reach the crest and run up the Stars and Stripes. Finally, they fought in the Battle of Missionary Ridge. They began to march on Atlanta, but were sent back to guard the railroads in Chattanooga. Upon getting out of the hospital, James rejoined his unit, and the three brothers served duty in the Chattanooga area until they were mustered out with their unit on 17 November 1864. Now, we last talked about Charles, the father, when he deserted and was helped home by his sons, but his story was far from over. About a year later, he must have recuperated enough and felt comfortable returning to his unit. He headed out to Chattanooga to link back up with them, but on 23 January 1864, he was arrested in Knoxville. He was returned to his unit on 7 February and held in confinement until he could be court-martialed. It was a very eventful time during the war, and his court-martial wasn't held until 5 months later. On 16 July 1864, at Ottawa, outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee, Charles was court-martialed, found guilty, and given the harsh sentence of a dishonorable discharge. It was the middle of the war, and the Army couldn't just let men desert and go home, even if they had a good reason, like being injured. Now, even this wasn't the end of the story. There must have been more details and good reasons for Charles to desert and go home, because later he was awarded a veteran's pension for his service. Usually, men had to apply to have their desertion status overturned in order to receive a pension. I've seen many of these, and almost always they are denied. Charles's was apparently approved, and he received soldier's benefits until he died in 1892. Wow! Now we know the amazing Civil War story of this family. What are your thoughts? Were you shocked by this story? How would it affect you if you discovered a story like this about one of your ancestors? I'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments below. And I wonder what stories like this could be hiding in your family tree. When we discover stories about our ancestors, especially like this one, history becomes tremendously more real. The events and locations that we read about or drive by begin to have a different impact on us, and we are bestowed with a deeper, enlightened understanding. Discovering and preserving stories like this is a passion of ours, and we are proud to discover this one, share with their descendants, and all of you. And remember, family tree nuts, let our nuts find the nuts in your family tree.